Notorious Media.
So today's WTF is going to be a little different than what you're used to, but we promise it won't disappoint and will probably still make you say WTF. Okay, G, before we get into today's story, I have to ask you something. If you could con your way into literally anything for a week, money's not real, consequences don't exist, what would you do?
Oh, super easy. I would tell every hotel on earth that I'm royalty and just let them wait on me hand and foot, fluff my pillows, peel my grapes, the whole thing, and probably get a horde of long-haired dachshunds. 100%.
Not surprised at that last tidbit at all. Okay, but that is basically the exact energy of today's guy, except he did it for almost 30 years.
30 years. And honestly, he never really needed a break because he just kept going. We are talking about Anthony Gignac, also known as Prince Khalid bin Al Saud, also known as the Prince of Fraud, which is a nickname the LA Times gave him back in 1991. And it stuck for a good reason.
I simultaneously already love and hate this guy. And we both know how it's going to end, so stick with it. I'm Amber.
And I'm Gina.
And this is Weird True Crime. So let's back all the way up because you cannot understand how Anthony Gignac became the Prince of Fraud without understanding where he started. And where he started is about as far from a palace as you can get.
On July 20th, 1970, a baby named Jose Enrique Moreno was born in Colombia. A couple years later, he got a little brother. And by 1975, when Jose was just 5 years old, both boys were orphaned.
5 years old, on the streets of Colombia, with a 3-year-old to take care of. According to a defense attorney who spoke about his case, little Jose was foraging and stealing food for the both of them and figuring out where they were going to sleep every single night for 2 years.
That is genuinely heartbreaking. And I say that as someone who is about to spend the next hour being unable to fully sympathize with this man.
Right, and I think that tension is kind of the whole point of this story. Someone who knew Jose as a kid told Vanity Fair that while he was struggling to survive, he noticed something. Some people weren't struggling. Some people had big houses, walls, security guards, and they never had to think about where their next meal was coming from.
And that just lodges itself in a 5-year-old's brain forever. In June of 1977, Jose and his brother were adopted out of a local orphanage by the Gignacs, a middle-class couple from Michigan. So these two little boys go from the streets of Colombia to the Midwest, have to learn an entirely new language, and Jose Moreno becomes Anthony Gignac.
New country, new language, new name. That's a lot for a little kid to process, and it clearly left a mark because someone who met Anthony right after the move told Vanity Fair that you could tell his life on the street had stayed with him. Their quote was that he yearned for the good life and the limelight. He wanted to be someone important.
And that's exactly where we start seeing the seeds of the guy we're about to spend this whole episode on. Anthony starts telling his classmates he has money and power he doesn't have. His mom owns a famous hotel, apparently. His dad's a famous actor, apparently. Classic embellishing kid stuff. Except it escalates fast.
6th grade fast, actually. Anthony would have been 11 or 12 years old, and according to Vanity Fair, he called a local Mercedes dealership, told them he was a Saudi prince, and said his dad was going to buy him a Mercedes.
A 12-year-old talked a Mercedes dealership into a test drive. I don't know that I could pull that off at 40. So he convinced a salesman to pick him up at a mall and take him on a few rides. Then he told the guy he'd buy the car, his father would wire the money, and he gave the salesman his mother's phone number.
At some point, the dealership calls his mom to say the Mercedes is ready for pickup, and she has absolutely no idea what they're talking about.
Honestly, I would pay real money to have been a fly on the wall for that phone call.
I can't even imagine what she had been thinking at that moment.
Like, bro, I thought you were at school. What are you doing?
Well, when nobody paid for the car or picked it up, the dealership called the police, who showed up at the Gignac house. We don't know exactly what happened after that, but I'm guessing that salesman had a pretty rough week.
Could you imagine his supervisor being like, what the hell do you mean? Some 12-year-old came in and you gave him the test drive and he said he'd wire you money from like his mom. What? Are you an idiot?
I think that's more of a rhetorical question.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I don't even feel bad for that guy. Like, come on. So, what do you do with a kid who's already pulling off car dealership cons in 6th grade? His parents tried. They sent him to therapy, sent him to camp, and at camp, he told everyone there that he was rich and powerful too.
It's like once he found something that worked, he just kept running it. Then in 1982, when Anthony was 12, his parents divorced. Anthony stayed with his mom, and his little brother went to live with their dad. And according to Vanity Fair, that split him and his brother up, and it wrecked him. He later testified, quote, "The one person who meant anything to me, my brother, who I took under my wings, was taken from me," end quote.
Okay, that part actually gets me a lot. These two boys survive the streets of Colombia together, and then they get separated by a divorce. I will never understand it when parents split up kids in situations like this, ever. So it sent him into a full breakdown. He ended up in 2 different psychiatric hospitals and a halfway house.
And then in 1987, at 17 years old, he ran away and started living on the streets again, except this time in Detroit. So we're back to square one, except now he's a teenager who already knows how to talk his way into things.
And that's exactly what he does. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Anthony starts using stolen credit cards to hire limousines and rides around Detroit pretending to be Prince Adnan Khashoggi, a real billionaire Saudi arms dealer who was, at the time, the richest man in the world.
So a homeless teenager is riding around Detroit in a limo pretending to be the richest man alive. He gets caught doing this, and about 2 months later, he picks up and moves to Los Angeles because, according to his mother's partner, Anthony was, quote, attracted to Hollywood because of all the glamour and wealth, end quote.
Sure, makes sense. Go where the marks are. Once he's in LA, court documents show he obtained a California ID card in the name of Khalid bin al-Saud, an actual real Saudi prince. And this is the identity Anthony would keep coming back to for the next 3 decades.
So he didn't just pick a random fake name. He picked a real person's name and just wore it like a costume for 30 years.
So let's talk about how he actually got away with this for as long as he did, because I think that's the part people struggle with the most. Like, how does a random guy just convince multiple businesses he's Saudi royalty?
A few reasons, honestly. He had tan skin and dark hair, so he could physically pass. Sometimes he dressed in traditional Saudi royal attire, other times just very expensive, very tasteful clothes and jewelry. He studied the actual royal family enough that he could answer basic questions about them.
And he had an almost unbelievable amount of confidence. According to the American Greed series, when employees pushed back on him, he wouldn't get quiet and slink away. He would get loud, aggressive. He'd yell, "Do you know who my parents are?"
That's the opposite of what you'd think a con artist would do. I mean, if I were lying about being royalty, I'd want to keep a low profile. But a former assistant U.S. attorney explained it perfectly. nobody would really believe that if you were faking this, you would draw that much attention to yourself and scream and yell. Because it's so bold and so opposite of what you'd expect from a con man, that's probably why it worked.
It's reverse psychology, but for fraud. So let's watch this actually play out. July 1991. Anthony is 21 years old, and over the course of about 4 days, he defrauds multiple LA establishments out of more than $10,000.
He checks into the Regent Beverly Wilshire Hotel, the historic luxury hotel in Beverly Hills, and convinces the staff his family will cover his room and food. He even gets them calling him Your Highness.
The staff is calling this random guy Your Highness. I'm sorry, I would have questions. I don't think I would just go along with it that easily, but whatever, you do you. While he's staying there, he racks up $7,500 in limousine bills, having them drive him around town for days, telling them his family will cover it. The limo company's manager later told the LA Times that Anthony was, quote, a heck of a con man. He's excellent, end quote.
The manager said he was suspicious at first, but all of that went away the second he saw hotel staff calling Anthony Your Highness. It's a snowball effect. He also talked Rodeo Drive shop employees into handing over a Louis Vuitton luggage set and a rare coin collection.
Why are none of these people asking questions? And why is nobody taking payment before they're oh my God. Okay. He must be a real charmer. That's all. Wow. Rodeo Drive. Of course. After 4 days, he's charged nearly $3,500 in room and food bills. And someone finally asks when he's actually going to pay. He keeps saying his father will handle it. They stop believing him. The cops get called and he's arrested right there at the hotel. Freaking finally.
So he's charged with 4 counts of grand theft, 1 count of credit card abuse, and 1 count of forgery. He was offered a plea deal and turned it down to go to trial.
Bold move for a guy with this much evidence against him. His trial starts in October 1991. The prosecution gets through 17 witnesses, and Anthony decides he's done and pleads no contest to everything. And that's when the LA Times gives him the nickname that's going to follow him for the rest of his life.
The Prince of Fraud. In November, he's sentenced to 2 years. And at sentencing, in maybe the most Anthony Gignac moment of the entire story, he tells the judge he has a $1,000 check he can hand over to help make up for what he stole. And he'll come up with another $1,000 if the judge will just put him on probation instead.
He tried to buy his way out of a fraud sentence with a check that is most definitely also fraudulent. We don't actually know if it was good, but given everything else about this man, I would not put money on it.
So, the judge said no and pointed out that Anthony's record showed he needed real time behind bars. And the LA Times, in their coverage, quoted one of Anthony's own reports as saying he was so good at deception that it was doubtful he'd ever give it up for, quote, a mundane existence, end quote.
Foreshadowing if I've ever heard it.
So, you'd think getting arrested and nicknamed the Prince of Fraud in the actual newspaper might make a guy reconsider his life choices.
You would think that, and you would be wrong, because we have a lot more episode left. So, by summer of 1992, Anthony's out of jail and he's forging documents to look like he's a real member of the Saudi royal family, complete with fake law firm and bank names and official-looking seals. He uses those documents to get real credit cards issued in the name Khalid bin Al Saud.
So now he's not just talking his way in. He's got the paperwork to back it up. He uses one of those fraudulent Amex cards to move into the Ritz-Carlton in San Francisco, stays there for an extended period until the fake charges get caught and he's arrested. Serves a little over 50 days, gets out on parole, and does not stick around.
So he heads to Hawaii next. And this is where things get genuinely wild because he manages to con two separate couples out of nearly $30,000 total. One couple he convinces to buy a share in Saudi Arabian oil field that does not exist and gets $8,500 out of them for it.
The second couple is even wilder because the hotel Anthony's staying at actually gets suspicious of him, runs a check, figures out he's not a prince, and calls the police.
So this should be the end of it. But hours go by and nobody's arrested him yet. So a hotel staff member introduces Anthony to a wealthy couple that frequently stays there.
Okay, so the hotel already knew he was fake, and they introduced him to guests anyway?
They did. So Anthony tells the couple he's a Saudi prince and asks if they can cover his hotel tab until he can get cash out of his safety deposit box. He gives them jewelry worth around $9,000 as a sign of good faith, and they agree and pay his bill, which was almost $21,000.
The couple eventually finds out Anthony's a fraud, and they also find out the hotel staff knew all along and introduced them anyway, specifically to get their bill paid. So the couple sued the hotel and won a settlement of almost $89,000.
I'm in shock. The hell? Hotel, they're like, I don't care. We just want our bill paid. So.
And it ended up costing them more money in the long run.
Also, you know that jewelry was not worth that. That is costume jewelry from the equivalent of probably Claire's. You know? Like, come on. Oh, good for that couple, honestly. Sue the hotel that pimped you out to a fake prince. So Anthony keeps traveling, keeps running the same basic scam. July 1993, he's 23, he stays at the Walt Disney World Grand Floridian in Orlando and racks up over $14,000 before getting caught. Pleads guilty, gets probation.
About a month after his release, he goes to the Grand Bay Hotel in Florida, racks up $27,000 in charges, then goes shopping and spends $51,000 at Saks Fifth Avenue. That's an $80,000 week, and none of it's real money.
After the shopping spree, he invites two men up to his hotel suite to party. Except instead of partying, they beat him up and rob him, and police get called to the hotel.
You would think that's finally some real consequences. But the police hear that two men beat up a Saudi prince, so they call the actual Saudi embassy to figure out what's going on. The embassy says they have no idea what the police are talking about. The real prince is definitely not staying at a hotel in Florida. By the time the police piece it together, Anthony's already fled the state.
Yeah, I feel like a real Saudi prince would have better things to do than stay at a hotel in Florida.
100%.
Oh, man. So the con survives, even getting beaten up and robbed. One of the officers who worked the case gave the Spokesman-Review a great quote. He said, "I've busted people claiming to be many things. I once had a businessman with 4 resumes in his briefcase and a mustache and a beard kit. But to impersonate royalty, that's pretty bold."
It really is the boldness that keeps carrying this whole scheme. Eventually, he's caught in Chicago, extradited back to Florida to face charges for Grand Bay and Saks Fifth Avenue, including fraud and grand theft. And while he's sitting in jail waiting for that trial, he manages to commit an entirely new set of crimes from inside the building.
From inside jail. This is honestly one of the craziest things in this whole file. He starts contacting attorneys, still posing as Prince Khalid, telling them if they bail him out, his father, the king, will repay them.
One attorney actually falls for it, hires 2 bail bondsmen, pays $46,000 to get Anthony out. The bondsmen take him to their office to wait for the money from, quote, the king. The money never shows up. They tell him he's going back to jail.
This sounds like one of those modern day email scams that you get where it's like, I'm stuck in this country and I need X amount of money to like whatever,
Oh my God, is this where that originated?
Could be. Could be. It's giving me flashbacks to some emails that I've seen in my life. That's for sure. Well, Anthony asks if they can swing by an American Express office first. He can get the money that way. They say, sure.
Why would they say sure at this point? I don't know, but they do. So he goes into the Amex office, tells them he's a Saudi prince, says he lost his platinum card. Employees get skeptical, so they have him answer a security question. He gets it right, and they issue him a replacement card with a $200 million line of credit.
200 million. Not a typo. And the reason he got the security question right is because he had two people working on the inside at American Express.
Yep, he had inside men at American Express. So the second he's got that card in hand, he pays off his own bond, hires a limo, and goes to a jeweler with the bail bondsman and spends about $22,000 on 2 Rolex watches and an emerald and diamond bracelet.
Okay, so let me get this right. He used a fraudulent card to pay off the fraud he used to get bailed out and then went shopping. The Rolexes went straight to his 2 inside contacts at American Express as payment for their help. I was wondering where the payment was going then.
There it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So for the next few days, he's traveling the country with a bail bondsman, buying out entire first-class cabins on flights, entire floors of hotel rooms, until American Express calls the bondsman and tells them the card that paid Anthony's bond is being used fraudulently.
That's when they finally figure out he is not a prince and they take him straight back to jail. He eventually gets sentenced to 616 days for the Grand Bay and Saks Fifth Avenue fraud.
So you would think that would slow him down? No, it doesn't. While he's serving that time in the summer of 1994, he calls Syracuse University, posing as Prince Al Saud, and says he wants to donate $45 million to the school.
From inside a jail cell, he tells the university that he can only do this if they wire him a portion of the taxes owed on the donation, which comes out to $16,000. And the university actually wires it to him.
Into an account in Michigan, which, not suspicious at all for a Saudi royal donation. That account had been opened by Anthony's younger brother, who he'd recently reconnected with. Both brothers were convicted of wire fraud for the Syracuse scheme.
Anthony gets 3 years and 10 months, and while he's serving that sentence, he tries to escape. He covers his cell floor in shampoo and sets it on fire, apparently thinking he could use the chaos and distraction to slip out. Also, now I'm terrified because I did not know that shampoo was flammable.
Yeah, see, no, that is not a plan. That is a fire hazard with delusions of a plan. It earns him an extra 3 years. So around 2002, 32-year-old Anthony is released on parole, moves back in with his mom in Michigan, and immediately starts acting like a prince again.
In June of 2002, he's arrested in Florida after charging more than $27,000 at 2 factory outlet malls. He also picks out 2 Lamborghinis worth $500,000 at a dealership, says he'll pay once his wire transfer comes through, and while he's waiting, the dealership owner leases him a Mercedes convertible.
Why would they do that, you ask? It's because Anthony showed them a platinum Amex with Prince Al Saud's name on it, and the owner told the Orlando Sentinel he actually believed Anthony was a prince because Anthony knew the names and cars of other embassy customers who'd bought vehicles there before.
So he's done his homework enough to reference actual embassy clientele. He gets arrested, charged with grand theft, using a false name to obtain a credit card, and more. In December 2002, he pleads no contest to the credit card charge, a misdemeanor, and the serious charges get dropped because someone paid off the entire Amex bill.
Nobody knows who paid it. A prosecutor said it was paid on time or within a week of being due, and they never figured out the source. Hours after entering his plea, Anthony walks free and heads back to Michigan.
This man has more lives than a cat, and every single one of them is committing fraud. Who the hell paid that bill?
I know. I think that's my favorite line in this entire script, by the way.
It's amazing.
January 2003. Anthony's back in Michigan, still playing Prince. On January 3rd, court documents show he went to Saks Fifth Avenue and somehow got a hold of the real account number belonging to an actual member of the Saudi royal family and used it to buy about $11,300 in merchandise.
He really likes Saks.
That's what I was thinking.
So much. The real account number, not a fake one. Then he uses the same scheme at Neiman Marcus, complaining about rude treatment, threatening to cancel a fake $70,000 order, and even faking a call from the Saudi embassy, demanding the store apologize to the prince.
He racked up almost $18,000 there before someone caught on, and he's arrested before he can even leave the parking lot. When investigators ask how he got the real account number, he tells them he actually knows the Saudi royal family, that he had an affair with a real prince, and the family was paying him to stay quiet about it.
The excuses just keep escalating in absurdity. They investigate the claim, and an assistant to the U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia confirms Anthony is not a member of the royal family and has no association with them whatsoever. To this day, nobody actually knows how he got that real account number.
Which, that kind of genuinely unsettles me just a tad. I mean, he had a real inroad somewhere that was never explained. He's charged with impersonating a diplomat, and while he's awaiting trial, he mails Citibank a letter demanding they wire him $3.9 million out of a real prince's trust fund.
While he's already facing charges for impersonation, he tries it again by mail. He gets caught, hit with bank fraud on top of everything else. In October 2006, he pleads guilty to attempted bank fraud and impersonating a foreign diplomat, sentenced to 6 years and 5 months.
He's released in December 2011, and it does not take long before he's back in cuffs because the FBI finds a binder full of forged documents he's been using to get credit cards.
Yeah, a literal binder, like an organized system. He gets a year for that, and at his sentencing, he literally asked the court to give him back his binder.
Oh, classic Anthony. At what point does a judge just look at this man and go, we're never getting through to him?
Also, why do they keep letting him out? Here's a slap on the wrist. Here's a little bit of time. Okay, bye. Obviously, this man is never going to change. Figure it out, guys. In 2013, 43-year-old Anthony is released and put on parole for about 4 years and does not stop impersonating a prince. Are we surprised? No, we are not. In February 2014, he violates parole outright and flies to Florida to try and buy a resort for $200 million. This man really likes Florida.
So he gets caught and sent back to Michigan. At the parole violation hearing, he tells the judge he went to Florida to treat his depression and visit his brother, and that he's done impersonating princes. His quote was, "I have changed. I was not a threat to the community, Your Honor. I have history, yes. I have made a lot of horrible mistakes. The worst mistake I've ever made was going to prison and not being there for my mother when she died. I promised my mother I would never, ever come back to prison for a new crime."
Honestly, that's actually a pretty compelling speech, if you don't know anything else about this man. Except the prosecution tells the judge he was still actively running the $200 million Prince scam this whole time, and the judge gives him a year for the violation.
So the speech didn't work, and when he gets out, he doesn't stop, but he does change strategy. Up until now, he's been targeting hotels, department stores, businesses. So this time, he decides he wants bigger fish. He wants to defraud the ultra rich.
Oh, this is where it gets serious.
So, how does a career con artist level up from hotel bills to the ultra wealthy? You need an in, and that's what he found in 2015. Still posing as Prince Al Saud, he meets Carl Marden Williamson, a 51-year-old asset manager with a huge network of wealthy international contacts.
So, Carl's the bridge to the money. It's genuinely unclear whether Carl knew the truth about Anthony. According to Carl's wife, he truly believed Anthony was a real prince. Anthony showed him a bank statement claiming $600 million in assets and promised to make Carl a lot of money, which apparently excited Carl quite a bit.
I lean toward true believer, honestly, and I think that matters a lot for how this story ends, which we'll get to. But regardless of what Carl knew, we do know he was willing to lie for Anthony, telling people he'd personally known the prince and his family for 20 years, which was completely untrue.
So Carl becomes part of the act, whether he fully understood the act or not. He becomes a kind of business manager for Anthony and sets up an investment company called Marden Williamson International, or MWI, an exclusive fund only for select wealthy people.
Anthony and Carl tell investors the prince has a significant stake in Saudi Aramco, the real oil giant controlled by the actual Saudi royal family, and that Aramco is about to go public, which would be a lie at the time. They offer to sell pieces of Anthony's fake Aramco stake at a discount before the company goes public, promising investors they'll make 5 times their money.
And here's the wild part. Saudi Aramco actually did go public eventually in December 2019, after Anthony was already arrested. And when it did, the company was valued at over $1.8 trillion, making it the most valuable public company in the world.
So the underlying idea wasn't even crazy. The timing and the stake were just completely fake, which is honestly part of why it was so convincing. And on top of the Aramco pitch, they'd tell investigators it was customary to give the prince extravagant gifts before doing business with him: paintings, jewelry, cash. Investors were told this would show they held him in high esteem.
So it's a scam with built in tipping culture. And of course, none of the money went into any real investment. It just went straight into Anthony's pocket to fund the lifestyle that made the whole con believable in the first place.
It's a self-sustaining machine. He had an entourage, including a uniformed security detail wearing fake diplomatic security service badges. He drove Ferraris, Bentleys, Rolls Royces with fake diplomatic plates, traveled on private jets and yachts he claimed to own.
He handed out business cards that said Prince, His Royal Highness, Sultan. And sometimes, in front of investors, he would pretend to take calls from former presidents, billionaire executives, or his father, the king.
And he ran an Instagram account, Prince Dubai _07, full of pictures and flashy jewelry, luxury cars, captions like ballin', videos on boats, videos on private jets. And here's the thing, they weren't even good photos.
I'm really glad I was muted because I just busted out laughing.
Ballin'.
Ballin'? Are you kidding me? Also, this man's what, in his 40s now? Oh my God. This is so great. Okay. Genuinely could not pass as an actual influencer by today's standards. He'd post pictures of the real Saudi royal family and caption them, "My bad." And he never showed his own face on the account.
Which, in hindsight, is a massive red flag. But when you're in this deep in the theater, nobody's stopping to notice. To get even more investors, Carl introduced Anthony to an investment banker in London, who we'll call Linda, who specialized in connecting high net worth individuals with opportunities.
According to Vanity Fair, she opened major doors for the two of them. There's no indication she knew MWI was a scam. She was never charged, and her name isn't public. So she's collateral damage in the trust chain, essentially.
This con runs all the way until Anthony's arrest in late 2017. In total, MWI scammed 26 investors from at least 5 countries out of $8 million.
26 investors, 5 countries, $8 million from a guy who was pretending to be someone else's identity this whole time. That is genuinely mind-boggling. Not to mention, he had other people helping him who believed him the whole time.
So here's where it all starts to unravel. And it's kind of poetic because it happens when Anthony finally tries to con the wrong man. In February 2017, 46-year-old Anthony finishes out the terms of his parole and starts looking for a place on Fisher Island, an exclusive private island neighborhood off the coast of Miami.
Celebrities have lived there, including Oprah. In 2015, it was the richest zip code in the entire country. Of course, he's aiming for it. He first tries to buy a $21 million condo, but can't come up with the actual money, so that falls through. He settles for renting a 3-bedroom penthouse for about $15,000 a month and tells everyone he owns the entire high-rise.
Renting a penthouse and claiming to own the building. God. In March, he tells Carl and Linda he wants to buy a stake in the Fontainebleau, the famous Miami Beach hotel, and Linda calls the hotel's owner, Jeffrey Sofer, whose family was worth $4.2 billion.
So he's not even really trying to buy a stake. He's trying to get free stuff out of a billionaire. And the Fontainebleau had actually been struggling with debt. So when Linda tells Jeffrey that Prince Al Saud wants to buy a 30% stake for $440 million, way more than that stake was actually worth, Jeffrey is very interested.
There's a great quote here from Robin Farsad, who wrote a book called Hotel Scarface, explaining why someone this wealthy would even entertain it. He told Vice, Miami doesn't have the due diligence culture like Wall Street and New York. If you're a developer and someone's offering you cash with no mortgage or documentation involved, you're very happy to take that cash. Miami is the hot money capital of the world.
And the stats back that up. In 2016 and 2017, Florida was ranked first and second in the entire country for fraud and identity theft complaints to the FTC. Anthony picked the right state for this, and now I understand why he liked Florida so much.
Yup. So over the next few months, Prince Al Saud personally calls Jeffrey to move the deal along. In May, Anthony, Carl, Linda, and Anthony's bodyguards all stay at the Fontainebleau. And Anthony pays for everyone's rooms and food on a credit card in Al Saud's name, telling the staff he's making a deal with his good friend Jeffrey.
On August 11th, Anthony invites Jeffrey and his associates to his place on Fisher Island to discuss the terms. He gives them a full tour of his garage full of luxury cars, takes them up to his penthouse where the door buzzer literally says Sultan, and shows them an ornate box containing a letter he claims is from the Bank of Dubai, guaranteeing the availability of $600 million.
Then he tells them that before the investment can move forward, Jeffrey needs to show his respect through gifts. So that same day, Jeffrey gives Anthony jewelry and paintings worth anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000, depending on the source.
A billionaire just handed a fake prince 6 figures in gifts to keep a fake deal alive. I love that this guy was like, yeah, I'll give you this deal, but you have to give me stuff first. And he's just like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah, here you go.
So 2 days later, on August 13th, Jeffrey flies Anthony and some hotel executives to Aspen on his own private jet to keep hashing out the deal.
And this is exactly where the cracks start showing, because Jeffrey and his executives had started looking into that high-rise Anthony claimed to own on Fisher Island, and found out he didn't own it at all. He just rented the penthouse.
He's finally doing some digging? Okay. So they're already suspicious going into Aspen, and it only gets worse. One night at dinner in Aspen, the prince orders a pork dish.
The prince is supposed to be Muslim. Muslims do not eat pork. And when they call him out on it, Anthony throws a fit, asking how dare they question a prince.
After decades of studying the royal family enough to answer trivia questions about them, he gets taken down by a pork chop. It's almost beautiful in its stupidity.
Well, the deal doesn't get finalized in Aspen. Everyone flies back to Miami on August 15th, and Anthony offers to drive one of Jeffrey's executives home in his Ferrari, which has diplomatic plates on it.
During the drive, the executive complains that Anthony is driving recklessly, and Anthony tells him nothing will happen if he gets pulled over because he has diplomatic immunity.
That's such an unnecessary flex that ends up being the thing that gets him. It makes the executive even more suspicious. So Jeffrey ends up hiring DC Page, a former federal agent who runs a business intelligence firm, to look into Anthony.
Page figures out pretty quickly that Anthony is not a diplomat and not a member of the Saudi royal family. So the pork chop and the Ferrari flex are basically what unravel 3 decades of fraud.
Page writes up his findings and sends them to the State Department and the FBI, and the Diplomatic Security Service. An elite federal team takes over from there.
So the feds are officially involved, and the DSS agents discover Anthony and Carl have already left the country. Anthony's traveling on a fake passport, going around to meet with MWI's investors to squeeze out even more money.
He's still running the con while being actively investigated by federal agents. The agents track Anthony and Carl from Dubai to Hong Kong to London. And when the men land in New York on November 19th, they're both taken into custody. Anthony goes to jail. Carl is let go for the time being.
Law enforcement executes a search warrant at Anthony's penthouse and finds 2 fraudulent diplomatic license plates, a fraudulent DSS special agent badge, unauthorized credit cards, and financial documents in the name of an actual member of the Saudi royal family, and thousands of dollars in cash, jewelry, and artwork.
Investigators later found out that about half of the expensive jewelry Anthony had was fake. To save money on maintaining appearances, he'd buy the cheapest Rolexes available and have a jeweler glue inexpensive diamonds onto them.
So even the fake prince was cutting corners on his own fake luxury. He'd also lease or borrow luxury cars and yachts under various pretenses, and when they inevitably had to go back, he'd just tell people he'd grown tired of them.
On December 14th, federal agents raid Carl's house. He's interrogated for 6 hours while they search his home, and at the end of it, he's not taken into custody.
But that evening, Carl tells his wife he didn't know Anthony was lying about being a prince. And then he goes into a room in their house and takes his own life.
That's a genuinely heavy turn and a story that's had so much dark comedy in it up to this point.
And it really recontextualizes the whole thing. If Carl truly believed he wasn't just a co-conspirator, he was another one of Anthony's victims, and he paid the highest price a victim can pay.
Authorities did find enough evidence to charge Carl as a co-conspirator in the MWI scam, but after his death, Anthony faced the remaining charges alone. Anthony was charged with conspiring to commit a crime against the United States, passing himself off as a foreign diplomat, misuse of a passport, aggravated identity theft, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon.
In March 2019, 48-year-old Anthony pleads guilty to 1 count each of impersonating a foreign diplomat or government official, aggravated identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud.
And in May, he's sentenced to over 18 years in prison. In true Anthony fashion, he tells the judge, "The entire blame of this entire operation is on me, and I accept that." But then he immediately pivots and insists other people should have been charged along with him. He adds, "I am not a monster."
He accepted the blame and deflected the blame in the same breath. That is peak Anthony Gignac. After sentencing, the U.S. Attorney's Office released a statement.
It read, quote, "Over the course of the last 3 decades, Anthony Gignac has portrayed himself as a Saudi prince in order to manipulate, victimize, and scam countless investors from around the world. As the leader of a sophisticated, multi-person international fraud scheme, Anthony used his fake persona, Prince Khalid bin Al Saud, to sell false hope. He sold his victims on hope for their families, careers, and future. As a result, dozens of unsuspecting investors were stripped of their investments, losing more than $8 million. Today, in a federal court of law, justice spoke for the victims, and Anthony Gignac will now face years in prison." End quote.
As of this recording, Anthony is incarcerated at FCI Florence in Colorado. His release date is scheduled for February 28, 2032. He will be 61 years old.
Nearly 30 years of running the same basic con, from a 12-year-old talking a Mercedes dealership into a test drive, all the way to an $8 million international investment scheme. And it all ends over a pork dish and a reckless Ferrari ride.
It really is one of the wildest arcs we've covered. And what makes it so weirdly compelling is that underneath the Rolexes and the fake yachts and the Sultan door buzzer, this started with a 5-year-old kid trying to survive on the streets of Colombia, who spent the rest of his life chasing a version of safety and status he never actually earned, honestly.
It doesn't excuse what he did to the people he scammed, especially not what happened to Carl. But it does explain a little bit about why he never, ever stopped, even when he got caught over and over again.
Because for Anthony, being the prince wasn't really the con. Being the prince was the point. On that note, that's the story of Anthony Gignac, the Prince of Fraud, and honestly, one of the most tragic and ridiculous things we've ever covered on this show.
If you want to see more, there's a Vanity Fair piece linked in our show notes that goes even deeper into his life. It's genuinely worth the read.
Send us your thoughts on this one. We want to know who you would have wanted to punch first. Anthony or the hotel that pimped its own guest out to pay his bill?
Keep going back and forth, but it's really just a coin flip.
Yeah, it really is. Everybody sucks in this scenario. Well, until next time, stay safe.
And make good choices. Bye.
Bye.
Sorry, I had to eat a piece of cheese. And while you're getting water, I'm going to eat my cheese. I like cheese. Oh, I should probably go get water too. Yeah, I'll do that.